All right. Well, today we have a really fun guest, someone that you may know from ECS or the consortium or the breakaway team. And I'm really honored to have him on the show. Next Week's Life is heard by thousands of people around the country, frankly, around the world. We're happy to have Anthony Cucco, who you may know is the son of Frank Cucco, who is obviously one of our industry leaders. And he is the director of operations over at Impact Networking. So, welcome, Anthony.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. And obviously, you and I have been talking quite a bit about the future of the business. So before we get to that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you yourself and what interests you and your role at Impact Networking.
Yeah, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. I'm 26 years old, so I was born in 1997, and Impact was started by my dad in 1999. So pretty much my whole life, I watched my dad build the business from nothing. He had a couple of his partners who you all know, like Dan Meyer and Tom Peters and Nate Robinson, and he built it into what it is today with 1,000 employees over that time period. And pretty much my whole life, my goal is always to be exactly like my dad and all these other mentors that I was looking up to. So pretty much everything that I did was to get me towards that goal. So went to Stevenson High School here in Illinois. Did some internships during that period on the sales front and the marketing front. I went to Penn State University, took a little bit of a break on the business side for 2 years. I was focused on having fun. Then I got back into some internships there. Then during summers, then when I graduated, I dove into the sales side of the business where I learned a ton of different areas about negotiating and being a good listener and how to read people and speak to people and mold into all these different types of meetings and situations you're in. Then following that, I ended up taking over the client services team for our marketing division. So I had 20 people on my team that were dedicated to keeping our marketing clients happy, which was a huge responsibility, a lot of challenges on that, and kind of reworking that department and building a restructured team. Then most recently, I started my MBA at Northwestern Kellogg. So I'm doing that part time because I want to expand my skill set. I want to learn more about finance, management, operations, specifically strategy, a lot of the things that I didn't really focus on as much in college. And I've been really learning as much as possible in the business as well. For 7 months now, I've been rotating around and meeting with, I've probably met with like 70, 80 people and learned everything there is to know about the business. And I'm looking forward to kind of the future roles that I'm going to be folding into in 2025. But I like to golf, be outside, hang out with my girlfriend, work out, eat, go to Italy, like your shirt says there.
So I wore this in honor of your father, who I know is in Italy this week, which really frustrates me. I tell him all the time, again, and I'm not there. So let's go back a little bit to you were there at the early days, really, of your father growing his business, and born right before he started it. So is it safe to say that the copier business, print business, as we would have called it back then, is part of your DNA?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, that's probably the interesting thing is that's probably the area of the business that I know least about because we've evolved so rapidly into these other services. But yeah, I mean, that's where we started and that's where a lot of those skills came from working with my mentors who were ingrained in that industry. But they've evolved too.
So when you think about the early days of your dad's business, and obviously I'm a huge fan of your dad and Impact, when you think back to those early days, what you said you wanted to be like your dad. That was part of your goal, I think, your life ambition. And what strikes you about those early days with your dad and when he was growing the business with Dan and his partners? What really made you go, yeah, I need to be like him. I need to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways I could answer that, but it really boils down to purpose, in my opinion. I remember one of the stories I always remember is my dad would drive my brother and I to school, And I always loved listening to his phone calls where he was just super passionate about what he was doing, talking to Nate Robinson every single day. He would blast rock music and be super excited about going to work. And he would teach us many life lessons, about like he would get off a phone call, then be like, that's why you have to stand your ground in these situations, or that's why you need to make sure that these people feel valued, and like just little lessons like that. And I just always felt like he loved what he did. And and I thought it was always cool that he wore a suit and tie and, had a professional look and was building something. That was always something that I wanted to be a part of.
So was there a point in your early life where you really came to the conclusion that, I'd really like to work with my dad and I'd really like to work with Impact Networking? Was there something there, or was it just a natural progression?
Yeah, I didn't know until probably a year and 3/4 into my career at Impact full time, because I did a sales internship where I learned a ton, but I didn't think that that was the path for me. I didn't like the prospecting and the cold calling and getting rejected a million times as much. Then I did the like more internal marketing side, and I was interested in that, but I didn't want to be like too. I liked the client side. I didn't want to be too far in the weeds there. So, like I said, I started in the sales side when I graduated college, but I was more in like a subject matter expert position. So the reps would identify opportunities, then I would come in for like to talk about the service. And that was extremely difficult because I was working with people who had worked at Impact for literally 15 to 20 years, who knew our business inside and out. And I was whatever 21, 22 years old, and there was a ton of obstacles, and I had to earn their respect and educate myself and really like own my craft. So that even during those times, I didn't know for sure if that's what I wanted to do. But when I started to see success and close some big deals there, and feel like I was, earning the right, then I felt like this was the home for me. And then ever since then, like the more responsibility I've gotten, the more wins I've had, the more passionate I am about staying here.
So after all these years of being around your dad, obviously, and the business, what would you say are Anthony Cucco's greatest strengths? What do you?
Greatest strengths.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious what other people would say. I guess they could maybe comment when you post this, but I would say empathy is a big thing for me, and that's just from learning that from my dad. My dad always took me on his trips when I was a kid all around the world, and he always, was a good listener to people that he worked with. He always emphasized making sure that people feel cared about, and that's what great leaders do. And I think that that's something that I've always cared a lot about. I care a lot about how people feel. I'm always analyzing how people are reacting to certain situations, and I think that that is something that has helped me be successful and gain respect from others because they know what my intentions are. Then I don't know. I think I'm a good communicator, and I think I work hard, and I really care about leveling myself up so that I'm more valuable.
And what would your dad say are your greatest strengths?
I could tell you what he thinks my greatest weaknesses are.
Okay, let's do that.
My dad thinks that sometimes I get too I'm like volatile emotionally, so I'll be like super high on the highs and super low on the lows. And he's taught me a lot about the fact that when you're leading big teams, it's you have to go into battle every day and keep on a game face, and you can't let your people see if you're super bummed out or frustrated with something, or if you're extremely excited and you're like overly excited. He says that you should always keep a level mental state, and that's something that I think grown a lot in, and it's as I've matured also. I think it's hard when you're right out of college and you get kicked in the teeth a couple times, but the more experience you get, the better you are at handling those adversities.
Well, you're a young fella. I mean, you're a young leader, and I think you might be a little bit too hard on yourself at 22, 23, 24, and taking on such responsibility. You're in a constant accelerated learning curve, and be it physically, generally speaking, and or from a business perspective. So I think I'd exercise a little caution about being too critical. I think you're doing awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And your dad, you and your dad, you're kind of like mirror images. I look at you, I hear you, you sound like your dad, you kind of look like your dad. Um, those are big shoes, to step into. And how do you feel about that responsibility? Frank Cucco's quite the guy.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that I'm gonna be candid with you. I think for a while it was stressful thinking about like how am I gonna get to that level? How am I gonna get those skills? How am I gonna be as confident as he is? But as of late, I've become very confident in that, and I know the things that he's really good at, and I know the things that he's not as good at, and there aren't many of them, but everybody has flaws, and I've been able to learn by watching him my whole life of like here's some of the things that I would do differently, like you always do with any leader, no matter how great they are. And I think that I have other strengths that maybe he isn't as strong at. So I'm just able to look at myself in the mirror and understand how I can own my skill set in order to be the best possible leader I can. And I'm really confident that I can, be someone who can do a job like that in the future. And the one thing that my dad has always taught me that has literally gotten me to where I am, which is why I love Impact so much, is there's no, like there's no declining offers. There's no I don't think I'm ready for that role. He's always pushed me into those roles and said, stop being a wussy and get in there. Then he's always been right. Sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 2 years, but you always step up to the plate if you're the type of person that can take on a challenge.
So when you look at, and that's great. I like the way you articulated that. If you take what you just said and segue into, one of the things that I'm always looking at is either part of the consortium or part of the Executive Connection Summit, is the requirement to no longer pivot, but really to be a whole different industry. And you as a young person, so your dad and I, I'm older than your dad, but we come from a generation, born and bred in copy and print. And now we're looking at all these things, all the possibilities going forward. What do you, as a young leader inside of Impact, what do you think about this industry? What should we be doing?
I think, I guess the reason why I like the industry is because it's not really stagnant. At least at Impact, it's not stagnant. We house a lot of different areas that a lot of people my age want to get into, like cybersecurity, managed IT, managed digital transformation. We're trying to do more of like a consulting service for our offerings, marketing. Like these are all cutting edge areas, but to me, it all falls under the same bucket. Even looking back at print, and I'm not a print expert, but when from what I saw back in the day, print is all about driving clients' businesses forward, even if it's only in that print area. It was to help clients, be more efficient at printing and support their efforts as a business and do whatever it takes to make them happy. And I think that's where, these services also are going, even if it's not commodity driven. Like in the marketing space, it's the same exact thing. What's the challenge and how are we going to help your business grow? And then when you pool all these things together, like that's why moving forward, we don't look at it as much as siloed services, especially on like the IT and AV and print side. We look at it more as like technology consulting. Take a look at your whole setup for technology in your business and how can we develop a solution that's going to fold into your business and actually help you move the business forward versus picking things off the menu of, oh, I want a copier here and I want some IT hardware here and only help desk, and then I want this software. Like that's really not something that's going to move the business forward as much as if we're like consulting you at a higher level.
It's interesting you bring that up. Hiro-san and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now. One of the things I find um, not appropriate anymore, calling a dealer a dealer. To me, that's like 1990 or something, right? Yeah, right. A car dealer. And so here and I, we've been advocating this workforce or workplace services provider. So you as quote unquote an old dealer, as you migrate into what you've done with Patrick Layton and IT services and everything else, is that the similar kind of thought process that you think the industry needs to embrace?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen and the decisions that we've made over the past couple of years, I mean, print is still at the heart of the business and it's a big piece of our revenue, but we're not afraid to, push that to the wayside in a way. Like we focus our attention on the more pressing services and more forward thinking services, and we know that we're going to put all our eggs in that basket or a lot of our eggs in that basket. And if we sell those bigger deals that are 1 million to $15 million over the term, they're going to want to buy printers too. So we're leading with the services and knowing that the printers will come, as opposed to like halfway dipping our toes into those services but heavily relying on print and being scared to jump out of that area of the business.
It was kind of music to my ears when I heard you say, I'm not a print expert." That contrast is phenomenally fun and so indicative of what needs to happen in our industry. You're brought up on the Patrick Layton world, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I think that's a wonderful statement. Probably one I'll repeat. I'll give you credit for it, but because you don't need to be a print expert anymore, you need to be this.
Exactly. But I also respect that too. Like I just met with 15 people from all different areas of the print side of the business, from the logistics side to the sales side to the technician side to implementation. And I mean, it's also an area that I think is super important. But in terms of like our go to market strategy, like I said, I think it shouldn't be like the first thing you're putting in front of a client. I think it's more of like an extra that's added on in addition to a $5 million deal.
Yeah, it's again, there are a lot of analogies between what you do. I look at my daughter. My daughter, basically grew up in the copy print business because of me, and she's so far removed now from copy print. And while you respect it and you appreciate it and you know what it does, your future's over here. Do you put any restrictions on what over here is? How do you study what impact should be doing next?
Well, right now I think we're all set in terms of like the services that we're putting out there, because the cyber is a newer service that we're focusing heavily on. And then we're looking at, like I said, like doing more of a consultative service. So focusing not as much on just delivering services, but also on like just the consulting side of things and speaking to people and advising them on their strategy. So yeah, I think that that's a key piece also on moving into those areas.
So the excitement for you, young guy, where do you see impact networking 10 years out? Where do you think it should be and want it to be?
I think a really high level of talent. I think in order to support the types of clients that we're targeting now, because we've slowly pushed our ideal client profile higher and higher to, back in the day used to be free assessments and $3,000 IT contracts and a couple of copiers, to now we have minimums of like we won't even want to sign an IT contract unless it's ten to $15,000 minimum. So when we're performing at that high of a level, we need the employees to back that up, and we have a ton of really smart employees. But I think building a system to better incubate higher level talent coming right out of college so that we can be better consultants to those clients, then I think, yeah, down the line we want to shift slightly towards more of a consultative model, because it's really hard to do the types of services that we do in marketing and IT, in terms of like actually executing and having the service desk and employing 1,000 people. I think that we could also move to a model where we're leading with the consultations and the strategy first, and then adding on like execution later, because that's a lot of money that people pay just for the consulting side, and there's a lot less intricacies of that than like trying to manage an IT client's entire network.
So let's kind of go back to something you said a little bit earlier that I wanted to circle back to. I think I heard you say that one of your strengths was you're empathic, or you have great empathy. Did I hear that
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So when you say that, and it's something I really appreciate and I'm pretty sensitive to. When you say that, how do you apply that empathy that makes it one of your greatest assets? Why is that so important to you?
Yeah, I think it's leading by example. even though we're a big company, I think that when you're in higher level, I guess the higher up you go, the more people are watching you and seeing how you treat people and seeing if you listen to people and seeing what you value. And I just think that for me, it's always about respecting everybody in the company, no matter what position they're in, whether it's, a driver or a VCIO or a janitor or a technician. It doesn't really matter. Everybody should be listened to, respected, their opinions heard. And I think it's like the little things. I think I've seen in other situations or heard from my friends of managers that never meet with their employees, or they just brush off things that they're saying, or when they're talking to them, they're not even paying attention. They're looking over their shoulder. I just think it's those micro things that people do that lose that make their reports feel not valued. And for me, those are just areas that I try to double down on. I don't manage a big team as of right now, but when I managed at the marketing side, trying to walk around, talk to people every single day, have a finger on the pulse, have meetings with people, truly take feedback about myself on how I can improve on the company, and then execute based off of that. I think that's an empathetic thing to do. And yeah, and also make the tough decisions of sometimes letting people go is the best thing for those people, and sometimes promoting people is the best position for other people.
So, and by the way, I think it's awesome. So one of the things, and again, this takes me down the path a little bit. You triggered. So one of the things that the older guys and gals in the business, like myself, there's shelf life for our ability to be relevant. There's a shelf life for us to lead, and you have to be humble enough to be able to transfer those, realistic enough to transfer those responsibilities to people like yourself. One of the things I find really curious, now you've got the millennials, you have all these different uh, generations, and I don't even know what generation you are at this point, but yeah, to me, it doesn't matter so much what generation you are. But some of the things I know that people like myself worry about, these things are the greatest asset in the world and their greatest liability. And they distract you from learning. I think sometimes they distract you from inner relationships and business and in life. What's your position on some of these tools? Are they, and now you look at AI, are they manageable? Are you fearful of these things, or what's your opinion on it?
I'm all for leveraging technology, obviously, based on what our business does. But one of the things that worries me is the attention span, and just the fact that, and I think I read something or listened to a podcast with Jeff Bezos where he was talking about how people's attention spans are just so small nowadays because people can't even read a full article. They have to listen to it in less than a minute. And then the quick form videos that you see on social media, the shorter blog posts, that people's attention spans have just been heavily reduced. So my take, like something I try to do is just read more. So like I have a goal to read 15 books this year because that was something that I learned from Jeff Bezos of like that's one way that you can really lengthen your attention span. Then also social media. I keep going back and forth on social media of like downloading it then undownloading it because there are some benefits of like for example, if I followed you on Facebook, I would know what you're doing and then I could jump on here and we could talk about that. But if I'm not participating, then I'm not in the know on that. But overall, I think you just have to use it responsibly, and if you're using it for the right ways, you can become a lot smarter. But if you're using it for the wrong ways, you can waste a lot of time.
So, and you know what? That's great to hear because I think the older generation worries about the breakdown of relationships just in life, whether it be at home or in work. So, moving forward a little bit about, I wanted to get your take on ECS and some of the things we're trying to do with the consortium. Do you what's your view? Are we doing well? What do we need to change? Do you appreciate what we're trying to do to help the industry float all boats?
Yeah, 100%. I think I've only been to two or three sessions so far and it's completely new to me, but I think it's super valuable, especially because I'm trying to get more integrated into those areas because like I said, I've more been involved in the service side of impact in terms of like marketing and IT and cyber, but I want to learn more about the print side and find ways to better innovate there. And I think you bring in a lot of really smart people, and there's people my age, and there's older people who own businesses, and I think it's a good way for people to connect and try to brainstorm ways to improve their businesses and the industry overall. So it's been great for me.
Well, that's good to hear. And by the way, if you think of any ideas, just pass them on. We'll take them. We'll take all you can deliver. So, think going back to your dad. Your dad really is quite an amazing guy. And at ECS, you may remember when he got up on the stage, and he said so many really great things and opened the kimono for people to learn about impact. But the one thing that just resonates with me since he was on that stage was when he talked about taking a risk. Got to take a risk. And is that your experience with him on a daily basis? And have you embraced the same kind of qualities, character qualities?
Yeah, 100%. We wouldn't be where we are right now without him taking risks. We would still be a copier company. So he has an outstanding vision for what something can be, and he also has a excellent vision for who can be the person to drive that. Just like his decisions around the IT division with Patrick Layton, with the managed marketing division, with the leaders there, with cybersecurity. He sees what it could be, then he finds the person who is talented and loyal, puts them in that position, and they run with it. And that's been, I mean, I can't think of a division that wasn't started in that fashion. And I that's why I love Impact so much too. We're all about finding talent from within and empowering those people. Then those people, from what I've seen, have become really loyal to the company and they grow with the company, as opposed to, I mean, we always want to get talent from the outside, but we're driven more heavily on building people up who are loyal to the company and investing in those people so that, they're built the Impact way.
Well, I have to tell you, and I say this with a tremendous amount of sincerity. Um, I the team at Impact Networking is really unique. I've never seen a company with so many brilliant young people, brilliant people, and culturally are aligned. These. I don't care if you're talking to Cynthia Bennett or Shane Bartlett or Patrick Layton or there's this same energy. Ashley Carnes, there's this same energy and the same kind of philosophy that's just driving. And by anybody's measure, you have to look at the top management and say that that's the responsibility that is probably one of Frank's greatest talents, is to be able to bring young people along like that. And he fulfills that responsibility with enthusiasm. So, yeah. So I don't want to belabor the point, but my hat's off to Impact for that and Frank and team.
Yeah, if you talk to those people, they'll probably tell you that we're still not good enough, which is the cool thing too. Unlike, a lot of the people look great from the outside, but if you actually talk to them about where we're trying to go, we're 25% of the way there. So we have big goals, and I mean, I think that there's a million things that I can improve at, and there's a million things the business can improve at. But the reason those people are the way they are, based on what you're saying, is because they're empowered to run their area of the business.
Well, and then you know what, that shines through. Every time I'm speaking with somebody, they're never satisfied. They're always enthusiastic and really on their game, but you always get that feeling they're not done. They're nowhere near done. And frankly, one of the biggest examples for me with Impact is Cynthia and your dad and Shane Bartlett with all the hiring of veterans programs. I mean, your dad came back from ECS. He said, "I'm in." And next thing I know, he's got a whole bunch of people contacting me and making sure that we get together and do it right. So I think you said earlier it's about execution, which would also be, I think, a gift wrapper of passion, which your dad has. So if I were going to ask you, I don't expect you to answer this question, but I'm going to throw it out there. So look at Anthony's face. He's like, "Oh no." So if you're in a meet, is there ever a situation where you wanted to say to your dad, "Dad, we need to do this"? Is there anything left, or are you doing that on a daily basis with Frank?
Oh, daily basis. Especially since I've been rotating around the company, talking to so many different people. I mean, he's getting pissed because I call him every day. And I'm like, "Hey, I have a question for you." And I mean, he always loves the ideas, but some of them he's like, "That's an outstanding idea." Then the other ones he's ready to punch me in the face. So then he'll call me back like 2 days later, and he'll be like, "That actually does make sense. Go and try to make that happen." Or he'll just let me run with it even if he doesn't agree with it. But there's been a ton of things. We're doing AI support for our technicians where they could search in a database and see how to fix a printer, which is way faster. We're doing a client metric, which pulls in all these different KPIs about clients so that you can get one composite score of the client's value. We're doing a new budgeting tool, a new raise and promotions tool, so people can just type in what are the KPIs that the finance team needs to see, and we could automatically approve those. We're doing a ton of different things all over the place, and he's a great leader because he allows those things to happen instead of like shutting the door on them.
Well, I'll tell you what, I would say this to his face if he was sitting here on this call. But clearly, he's proud of Impact. He's proud of you. I think he's proud of the industry that he's been so influential in. And it's very clear you're very proud of your dad. And that doesn't always happen in life, especially when a father and son or daughter and father work together. Sometimes that's a difficult thing to do. But you're the real deal. You are the real deal, and it shines through. And I applaud you and I encourage you. So, two quick questions. We'll end it here. Number one, how do you like working with Jenna? So you better tell a good story.
Good story. Well, I hung out with Jenna for the first time actually at the CDA conference, and we had a pretty good time. She was telling me some really good stories, and her husband sounds like a badass also. She was giving me the download on him. I know he's in the military. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited for future experiences with her as well, and she seems like a badass in general. So, definitely someone I want to continue working with.
Well, I used to tell her when she was growing up, and I would say the same thing about you. Some people I call the package. You got it. You're the package. You got all the tools. You got the gifts. You're blessed with all sorts of things, and you're learning. And so I see the same thing in you that I see in her, which is go get it, go do it. Just get it done, make it happen, because you are the real deal. So the last question I've asked you rhetorically 15 times, and hopefully you're prepared. Your favorite Sinatra song?
Favorite Sinatra song? Well, the funny story about that is Mike actually asked me before the recording, or he told me that he was going to be asking me that, and I told him I don't know any songs. So I looked it up here, and I do know My Way because I go to this Italian restaurant in Northbrook, Illinois, where they play that song and all the songs over and over again. But I think that's probably my favorite one.
All right. Well, you did your homework. You answered a question from an old guy. I appreciate it. And next time you talk to Frank, just say, "Hey, Dad, he keeps asking me about these Sinatra songs. Do you have one?"
I will for sure.
Anyway, you got any questions for me?
No, I would just say I hope that I'm coming on this podcast in 10 years and impacts $1 billion company. And I believe that that's going to happen. We have a lot of big changes coming, a lot of leadership changes. And yeah, I'm super confident that we're going to go and kick some ass and keep leading the charge as, a top business in the industry and setting a good example for others.
Well, you're a fine young leader. You're a fine young man. I'll say it again. Any father would be thrilled to have a son like you or a daughter like mine. So just keep doing the good work for the industry. Remember, float all boats is good for everybody. And we're going to let you go. So thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
You got it. Thanks, Anthony. A pleasure.